Hi everyone. So this week in sociology class, our professor asked us to look into death row inmates in Louisiana. So whenever I started going through the list, I noticed that there were substantially more males than females. So I counted that there are 55 males and only one female. So although I definitely expected it to weigh more in the men's favor, that there would be more men than women, I didn't expect it to be that drastic, that there would only be one. So the one female that I did find is Miss Antoinette Frank. She is from Orleans Parish, and she was a New Orleans police officer who was convicted of killing her partner and two others at a restaurant in Baton Rouge. In New Orleans. I just found it really surprising that there were so many men and only one female. The reason that I did think that there would be so many men, that there would be more men than females, is because typically you're on death row for a violent crime like death, like murder, and typically violent crimes are performed by men rather than women. So to me, it just made sense that there would be more men, but I did not expect that many. So after that, I started looking at the ages of the inmates in the inmates on death row in Louisiana. So I noticed that there were a few in their 30s, only 4. In their 40s, I counted 13, which is about 22% of the total of the inmates. I counted 21 inmates in their 50s, which is the biggest age group, which accounted for 36%. And in their 60s, I found 15 inmates, which was about 26%. So this, to me, just said that the population is aging. They've probably been in the system for a long time. I did notice that a lot of the crimes happened in the 80s or the 90s. So they've just been waiting all this time. And that can be due to lengthy appeals that they've been waiting to go back to court for. It's a very long process, or simply just delayed executions. So due to there being such a small number of younger inmates, it made me think that they're either not being sentenced to death that much anymore, or they just haven't been put into the system, they haven't been processed through. So being that the largest group was in their 50s, it leads me to believe that they're simply just waiting execution and waiting for the system, basically. So I made this graph to display the race of the individuals on death row, which I'm sorry, it's going to be reversed for you guys, but you can see obviously that the biggest demographic is Black individuals, with a 66% being in this category. 32.1% are white, and I found one inmate that was Asian Pacific Islander. So out of all of the inmates, only one was Asian Pacific Islander. A few were 17 were white, and 35 were Black. So if you compare that, the Louisiana numbers, to the national average, the national average for Black individuals on death row are 41%. So Louisiana specifically has a higher Black death row count than the national numbers, which I kind of found surprising. I wouldn't have expected that. So the person that I chose to profile from this list was Jeffrey Clark. Whenever I was going through the list, I saw that he was a part of the Angola Five, which I had never heard that term before. So whenever I saw it, it almost felt like I had missed out on a piece of Louisiana history that I didn't know about. So whenever I started reading it, I found out that he was already serving life in prison in Angola for a crime that he had committed in 1984 whenever he shot and killed Andrew Cheswick during an armed robbery at a Studebaker's Lounge in Baton Rouge, where he stole $2,600. So then, being in Angola, he attempted an escape in 1999, so that's a 15-year difference from his original crime to now. So Jeffrey Clark, along with 4 others in Angola, attempted to escape by taking 2 corrections officers hostage. So in the evening, they were in the education building of the prison, and they targeted 2 older officers that couldn't fight back physically, as well as obviously some of the younger ones. And these 2 officers were also known to mistreat the inmates. So whenever they got the officers, they bound and gagged them and took their keys, radios, and uniforms. So basically their plan was to trap those 2 officers, take their attire, and try and leave the prison dressed as officers. Unfortunately for them, the other officers on duty responded too quickly, and they weren't able to get out of the building before it was surrounded. So once it was surrounded, they began to stab and beat Captain Knaps, which was one of the officers. And once that started, the other officers that had surrounded the building began shooting, and one of the men, the Angola prisoners, was actually shot and killed during the rescue of the officers. And Captain Knaps, the officer that they had stabbed, also died in the scene, in the commotion. Excuse me, guys, I'm reading from my notes. So our teacher asked us to analyze this with whichever theory we thought best fit the crime. I believe that strain theory by Robert Merton fits this crime best. Actually, both of his crimes. So in both of his situations, I believe that Jeffrey Clark basically felt like there was no other option and almost like he had nothing left to lose. So in his original crime, let me read the theory first, and then I'll give my reasoning. So the theory is that crime occurs when individuals feel success is out of reach. So in the first crime, he was desperate for money. He basically had nothing else, nowhere to go, nothing for himself. And I think that he saw no other way, and essentially he had nothing to lose. So in that robbery, that's what got him to Angola. And then once he was there and was serving life in prison, again, I feel like he had, in his mind, nothing left to lose. He was desperate and had no hope of freedom, and he turned to crime and violence as a way out. So I feel like he just didn't have, in a way, a light at the end of the tunnel, or a path to success, or a path or a way to get what he wanted. And he turned to violence and crime as a result. Thank you for watching this week, and I'll see you next time.